It's amazing how a simple plant can literally change the world, right? Well, thousands of years ago, that's exactly what happened. A humble reed from the Nile River in Egypt became one of the most important inventions in history. It totally changed how people shared information, ran governments, and built an entire empire. So let's get into how they did it.
Okay, so imagine trying to send a message to your friend, but instead of your phone, you have to carve it onto a heavy, clunky clay brick that could shatter at any moment. That's basically what it was like in places like ancient Mesopotamia. But then you look over at Egypt, and they've got something totally revolutionary. It's lightweight, it's flexible, and you can carry it anywhere. This was papyrus, and believe me, it was a complete game changer.
So, what was this miracle plant? Well, it all starts with the papyrus plant itself, a tall reed that just loved growing in the marshy waters of the Nile Delta. Now, they didn't need the whole plant, just a special part hidden right inside the stem. So let's zoom in on this plant. It had this really unique triangular stem, and it could grow super tall, several meters high, with a big leafy tuft on top. But the most important part was its inner core, called the pith, which was incredibly strong and full of fibers. Best of all, it grew everywhere along the Nile, giving the Egyptians a huge, endless supply of raw material. Okay, so how do you get from a wet, stringy plant to a smooth, dry sheet you can write on? Well, the process was pure genius, part art, part science, and it all went down in workshops right next to the river. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, we have to define that key term, pith. The pith is the white, kind of spongy stuff you find inside the papyrus stem. This was the absolute star of the show, the one essential ingredient they needed to make every single sheet. The process itself was meticulous. First, workers would peel off that tough outer skin. Then they'd slice that all-important pith into long, thin strips. And here's the brilliant part. They'd lay them down in a grid, one layer going up and down, and another layer on top going side to side. When they pressed it all under a heavy weight, the plant's own sticky sap acted like a natural glue, fusing the strips together. After that, they just let it dry out in the sun and gave it a final polish to make it perfectly smooth. And the result of all that work? What started out as a simple marsh reed was now a strong, flexible, and beautifully smooth sheet, totally ready for writing. This was the ancient world's version of high-quality paper. Of course, having the paper is only half the story, right? You need people with the skill to actually write on it. And that brings us to the fascinating world of the ancient Egyptian scribe. So, who were these people, and what did they use to fill these papyrus sheets with history? Well, we're talking about scribes, who were highly respected professionals. And their toolkit? Surprisingly simple, but incredibly effective. Their pens were literally just reeds from the river, sharpened to a point, and then chewed at the tip to make a little brush. For ink, they used soot for black and a ground-up mineral called ochre for red, which was perfect for titles and important headings. They kept it all on a simple little palette with 2 dips in it for the different colors. And they weren't always carving those famous, beautiful, picture-like hieroglyphics. For everyday stuff, like business receipts or letters, they used a much faster, simpler script called hieratic. You can kind of think of it like the difference between formal printing and our modern cursive. It just let the scribes get the job done quickly. So, with the perfect material and skilled writers ready to go, papyrus basically became the engine that ran the entire Egyptian civilization. Its impact on everything from government to religion and trade was just massive. It allowed for a level of organization that was pretty much impossible before. And I am not kidding when I say it was used for everything. Keeping track of taxes, writing up legal contracts, recording religious spells for the afterlife, medical instructions, even students used scraps of it for their homework. This ability to keep portable records is what let a huge, complex government rule over such a vast kingdom. Now, for longer texts, they didn't just stack pages like a modern book. Instead, workers would glue about 20 or so individual sheets together, end to end, to create one long roll. We call that a scroll, and it became the standard way to store books and important documents. So just how long could these scrolls get? Get this. Some important religious texts, like the Book of the Dead, could be over 100 feet long. That's like rolling out a single document the length of 3 school buses. It just goes to show you how practical and durable this whole system was. Now, here's the thing. The papyrus plant only grew in Egypt. That gave them a complete monopoly on its production.
It became an incredibly valuable export, shipped all across the Mediterranean to places like Greece and Rome. By controlling the supply of the ancient world's most important information technology, Egypt became a true powerhouse of culture and trade.
But, like all technologies, the age of papyrus eventually had to come to an end. Its influence, though, is definitely not forgotten. A new material called parchment, which was made from animal skin, started to become really popular. It was even more durable than papyrus, and, this is crucial, you could fold it without it cracking. This single advantage allowed for the invention of the book format that we all know today, with pages you can actually turn. But here is the most direct connection to our lives. The very word we all use every single day, paper, comes directly from that ancient word, papyrus. Its legacy is literally built right into our language. When you really think about it, papyrus isn't just some old-fashioned paper. It's this incredible symbol of a deep human need, the desire to write down our history, to share our ideas, and to send our knowledge far into the future.
And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question for our own time. We have papyrus scrolls that are still perfectly readable after 3,000 years. But will anyone in the distant future have the right software or hardware to open the digital files we're creating right now? It really makes you think about what it means to preserve our stories for the generations to come.